The war had lasted for 47 years. Ambassador Chen Wei sat alone in her small office aboard the diplomatic vessel Hope's Anchor, reading through the same reports she had read 1,000 times before. The numbers never changed. 17 billion dead across both species. 400 worlds turned to ash. And still, the Vorthan Empire refused every peace offer the Galactic Council sent their way. She rubbed her tired eyes and looked at the holographic display showing the current battle lines. The Vorthan had pushed deep into the neutral zone again. 3 more human colonies would fall within the month if nothing changed. But nothing ever changed. The Council sent the same demands. The Vorthan rejected them. More people died. Chen Wei had been a diplomat for 30 years. She had helped end conflicts between a dozen species before the Vorthan War began. But this war was different. Every other species in the galaxy had tried to negotiate with the Vorthan. The ancient Kelari with their 1,000 years of diplomatic wisdom. The Nexu, masters of trade and deal-making. Even the cold and logical Synthari had attempted to find common ground. All had failed. The Vorthan simply would not surrender. They would not accept any terms that took away their military power. They would not agree to pay reparations for the worlds they had destroyed, and they absolutely refused to hand over their war leaders for trial, which was the one thing the Galactic Council demanded above all else. Chen Wei stood up from her desk and walked to the window. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly into the dark. Somewhere out there, ships were burning, soldiers were dying, families were losing everything they loved, and here she sat, reading reports that offered no solutions. She had 3 children of her own, 2 daughters and a son. Her eldest daughter had joined the military 5 years ago against Chen Wei's wishes. Last month she had received word that her daughter's ship had been damaged in a battle near the Vorthan border. The ship survived. Her daughter survived, but 20 of her crew members did not. Chen Wei thought about those 20 families receiving notification of their loss. She thought about the Vorthan families who had lost loved ones in the same battle. Death did not care which side you fought for. Death took everyone equally. A knock came at her door. Chen Wei straightened in her chair and wiped her eyes. Enter. Her aide, a young man named David Park, stepped inside with a data pad in his hand. His face showed the kind of nervous energy that meant something important had happened. David had been with her for 5 years now. He was smart, dedicated, and still young enough to believe that problems had solutions. Ambassador, we received a priority message from Earth Command. They want you to lead the next peace delegation to the Vorthan homeworld. Chen Wei almost laughed. The Council has sent 5 delegations already. What makes them think a 6th will succeed? This one is different, ma'am. Earth Command isn't working with the Council on this. They want to try something new. She took the data pad and read the message. Her eyes widened as she understood what they were asking. Earth wanted her to ignore everything the Galactic Council had demanded. They wanted her to start fresh, to listen to what the Vorthan actually wanted, and to find a way to give it to them. This goes against 40 years of Council policy, she said slowly. They'll never approve this approach. They don't know about it yet, David replied. Earth is acting alone. Admiral Zhao says we've lost too many people following the Council's methods. It's time to try the human way. The human way. Chen Wei had heard that phrase many times since humanity joined the galactic community. Other species often found humans confusing. They didn't follow the established rules. They asked strange questions. They looked at problems from angles no one else considered. Sometimes this made them seem foolish, but sometimes, just sometimes, it made them brilliant. Chen Wei remembered her grandmother telling her stories about Earth's history, wars that lasted for decades, conflicts that seemed impossible to resolve, and yet somehow peace always came eventually. Sometimes it came through victory, sometimes through exhaustion, but the best peace, the lasting kind, came when both sides got something they truly wanted. Arrange transport to the Vorthan border, she said finally. And get me everything we have on Vorthan culture, history, and psychology, not the military reports. I want to know who they are, not just how they fight." David nodded and left to make the arrangements. Chen Wei sat back in her chair and looked at the message again. This was either the opportunity of a lifetime or the mistake that would end her career. Either way, she had to try. Too many people had died for her to do anything else. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparation and study. Chen Wei read every document she could find about the Vorthan. She watched recordings of their cultural ceremonies. She studied their language, their art, their religious beliefs. Most of what she found was military intelligence, focused on weaknesses and vulnerabilities. But here and there, she discovered glimpses of something deeper. The Vorthan valued family above all else. Their society was built around clan structures that stretched back thousands of years. They believed that a person's worth was measured not by their individual achievements, but by what they provided for their children and grandchildren. This was so different from what the military reports suggested. The reports made them sound like mindless warriors who lived only for conquest. But the cultural records painted a picture of a species that fought because they had something precious to protect. 3 weeks later, Chen Wei stood on the bridge of the diplomatic shuttle Second Chance as it approached the Vorthan checkpoint. Around her, the crew worked in tense silence. Every previous delegation had been turned away at this point. The Vorthan would scan their ship, confirm they carried the usual council demands, and send them home without even allowing them to dock. The checkpoint was a massive structure, bristling with weapons platforms and sensor arrays. It had been built early in the war, designed to stop any invasion force that tried to approach Vorthan space. No enemy ship had ever gotten past it. No friendly ship had ever been allowed through it. "Incoming transmission," the communications officer announced. "The Vorthan are hailing us. Put them through." The holographic display flickered, and a Vorthan face appeared. They were a reptilian species, with scales that shifted between dark purple and black depending on their mood. This one's scales were almost entirely black, which Chen Wei had learned meant extreme distrust and hostility. "Human vessel," the Vorthan said in rough common tongue. "We have received word of your approach. You carry peace terms from the Galactic Council. We reject them as we have rejected all others. Turn back now." Chen Wei took a deep breath. This was the moment everything could change or fall apart. She thought about her daughter, somewhere on a warship near the front lines. She thought about the 17 billion dead. She thought about all the parents on both sides who just wanted their children to come home. "Commander, I do not carry terms from the Galactic Council. I carry terms from humanity alone, and I promise you they are nothing like what you have heard before." The Vorthan's scales flickered with surprise, showing brief patches of gray. "Explain yourself." "The Council demands your unconditional surrender. They demand you give up your weapons, your leaders, and your pride. They want to punish you for the war." Chen Wei paused, choosing her next words carefully. "Humanity does not want these things. We want to understand why you fight, and we want to find a way for all of us to stop dying." A long silence followed. The Vorthan commander studied her with eyes that had seen decades of war. Behind him, Chen Wei could see other Vorthan crew members watching the exchange with obvious interest. "You speak differently than the others," he finally admitted. "But words are easy. What proof do you offer that humanity truly wants peace and not victory?" Chen Wei had prepared for this question. She touched her data pad and sent a file to the Vorthan ship. "These are the coordinates of every human military vessel in this sector. Their weapons systems, their defensive capabilities, their patrol routes. If you wanted to, you could use this information to destroy them all." Her crew gasped. David grabbed her arm in shock. "Ambassador, what are you doing?" "I am showing good faith," she replied calmly, never taking her eyes off the Vorthan commander. "I am showing that humanity trusts the Vorthan to meet honesty with honesty." The Vorthen's scales shifted again, this time to a deep blue that Chen Wei had never seen before in any of her research. She didn't know what it meant, but something had clearly changed in how the commander viewed her. "You are either very brave or very foolish, human, perhaps both." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was different, softer. "Our Supreme Council will hear your terms. You may dock at Station Varathka. Do not make us regret this decision." The connection ended. Chen Wei released the breath she had been holding. Her hands were shaking, though she tried to hide it from her crew. "Ambassador," David said, his voice shaking, "you just gave our enemy everything they need to win the war. If they attack now—" "They won't," Chen Wei said with a confidence she didn't entirely feel. "The Vorthen have fought us for 47 years. They know humans are stubborn and proud and never give up without a fight. What they don't know is that we can also be humble. We can also be trusting. They have never seen that from any species in this galaxy." She looked out the viewport at the massive Vorthen station growing larger as they approached. In all the years of war, no non-Vorthen had ever been allowed inside their borders. She was about to become the first. "The real negotiation starts now," she said. "And this time we're going to do something no one else has tried. We're going to listen." Station Varathka was enormous, larger than any structure Chen Wei had ever seen. It hung in the darkness of space like a mechanical moon, covered in spires and docking bays and defensive platforms that bristled with weapons. But as the second chance approached, none of those weapons tracked their movement. The Vorthen were giving them safe passage, just as promised. The docking process took an hour. Vorthen engineers guided their small shuttle into a bay clearly designed for much larger vessels. Chen Wei watched through the viewport as armored warriors formed ranks outside, their ceremonial weapons gleaming under the station's lights. She had read about Vorthen honor guards in her studies, but seeing them in person was something else entirely. When the airlock finally opened, Chen Wei found herself facing a welcome party of 20 Vorthen warriors in full ceremonial armor. Their scales shimmered with patterns of silver and gold, marks of their elite status. Each one stood nearly 2 meters tall, towering over the human delegation. She had expected hostility. She had prepared herself for threats and intimidation. Instead, the warriors parted silently, creating a path for her to walk through. At the end of that path stood an older Vorthen, her scales showing the faded patterns of age, wearing robes instead of armor. "I am Elder Kesara," the old Vorthen said. "I have been appointed to speak with you before you meet our Supreme Council. Come, walk with me." Chen Wei followed the elder through corridors that hummed with activity. Vorthen of all ages passed them, some stopping to stare at the human in their midst, others hurrying by with the urgency of people at war. The station felt alive in a way that human military bases never did. It felt like a home. Everywhere she looked, Chen Wei saw evidence of family life. Young Vorthen playing in small gardens, elderly relatives being helped by younger ones, couples walking together, their scales touching in what she assumed was a display of affection. This was not just a military installation, it was a community. "Your gift of military information has caused much discussion among our people," Elder Kesara said as they walked. "Some believe it is a trap, others believe you are simply foolish, but a few, myself included, believe it is something else entirely, something we have not encountered before." "What do you believe it is?" Chen Wei asked. "Respect." The elder's scales shifted to that deep blue color again. "For 47 years, the galaxy has treated us as monsters, creatures to be defeated, punished, and contained. No one has ever shown us respect. Until today." They entered a large chamber filled with plants and running water. Chen Wei realized with surprise that it was a garden, a peaceful place in the heart of a war station. Flowers of colors she had never seen before grew alongside trees with silver bark. The sound of flowing water filled the air. Elder Kesara gestured for her to sit on a bench beside a small pond. This garden was created by my grandmother many generations ago. She believed that even in times of war, we must remember what we are fighting for: beauty, peace, a future for those who come after us. Chen Wei sat down, feeling the weight of centuries of history pressing down on her. "It's beautiful," she said honestly. "Tell me, human ambassador, do you know why this war began?" Chen Wei had studied the official history. The Vorthen had attacked a Galactic Council outpost without warning. They had refused all attempts at communication. They had spread across the neutral territories like a plague, conquering world after world. The Council had branded them as aggressors, invaders, and enemies of peace. "I know what the Council says happened," Chen Wei replied carefully, "but I suspect there is more to the story." Elder Kesara made a sound that might have been a laugh. "There is always more to the story. The Council does not tell how they banned our people from expanding into uninhabited space. They do not mention how they surrounded our borders with military stations to enforce that ban. They do not speak of how our population was growing beyond what our worlds could support, and how we begged for permission to settle new planets, and how that permission was always denied." She leaned forward, her old eyes burning with decades of anger. "We did not start this war because we wanted conquest. We started it because our children were starving, and the galaxy told us to let them die." Chen Wei felt something shift inside her. 47 years of propaganda, 47 years of seeing the Vorthen as heartless aggressors, began to crumble. She thought of her own daughters and her son back on Earth, safe and fed and free. What would she have done if someone had tried to starve her children? "Why has no one heard this story before?" she asked. "Because no one asked," Elder Kesara replied. "Every diplomat who came before you arrived with a list of demands. They did not come to listen. They came to dictate. And so we sent them away and we kept fighting because fighting was the only option anyone gave us." The elder stood and looked down at the pond. Small creatures swam in the water, their scales reflecting light like tiny jewels. For a moment, she seemed lost in memory. "Son died in the 3rd year of the war," she said quietly. "His ship was destroyed defending a colony full of children. He was not a warrior by nature. He was an artist, a painter of beautiful things, but he fought because there was no other choice." She turned back to Chen Wei. "My grandchildren have never known peace. They were born during the war, and they have grown up learning to hate humans and Kelari and all the other species who try to destroy us. I do not want that life for them anymore. I want them to know what the galaxy looks like without fire falling from the sky. Can you give us that?" "I don't know," Chen Wei admitted, "but I can promise to try, and I can promise that whatever terms I offer will not be designed to punish you for surviving." Elder Kesara studied her for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. "The Supreme Council will see you tomorrow. I advise you to sleep well tonight. You will need all your strength for what comes next." Chen Wei did not sleep that night. Instead, she sat in the small quarters the Vorthen had provided and rewrote everything she had planned to say. The terms she had brought from Earth were good, much better than anything the Council had offered, but they weren't good enough. Not anymore. She thought about Elder Kesara's words. She thought about starving children and closed borders, and a species pushed to the edge of extinction. And she thought about what humanity would have done in the same situation. The answer was simple. Humans would have fought too. They had done it before many times in their history. Wars of survival, wars of desperation. Wars fought not for glory or conquest, but because the alternative was death. By morning, she had a new proposal. It was bold, possibly too bold. It would anger the Galactic Council. It would make enemies among species that had been Earth's allies for generations. But it was honest, and it was fair, and it was the only chance for real peace. David came to check on her as she was finishing her notes. He looked worried when he saw the dark circles under her eyes and the scattered papers around her room. "Ambassador, you should have slept. You need to be sharp for the council meeting." "Sleep would have been a waste of time," Chen Wei replied. I had too much to figure out. She handed him the new proposal. Read this. Tell me what you think. David read through the document, his eyes growing wider with each page. When he finished, he looked up at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. This is not what Earth Command authorized. No, it's better. The Council will never accept these terms. You're giving the Vorthen almost everything they want. Chen Wei smiled tiredly. That's the point. We've spent 47 years offering them terms they would never accept. Maybe it's time to offer them terms they will. The Supreme Council chamber was a vast circular room with seats rising in tiers around a central platform. When Chen Wei entered, she found herself surrounded by hundreds of Vorthen, all watching her with expressions she could not read. At the highest tier sat 7 elders, including Kesara, wearing the ceremonial robes of supreme authority. The chamber was ancient, older than the war, older perhaps than human space travel. Carvings covered the walls depicting the history of the Vorthen people. Chen Wei saw images of great achievements and terrible losses, of heroes and villains, of wars won and wars lost. This was a species with a long memory. They did not forget their past. Human ambassador, the central elder spoke, his voice echoing through the chamber, you have been granted an audience with this council. You may present your terms. Chen Wei walked to the center of the platform. She could feel every eye in the room fixed upon her. Her heart was pounding, but her voice remained steady. Honored Council, I stand before you not as a representative of the Galactic Council, but as a representative of humanity alone. I come with an offer of peace, but more than that, I come with an apology. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Several elders leaned forward in surprise. For 47 years, the galaxy has called you aggressors. They have blamed you for this war. But yesterday, Elder Kesara told me the truth. She told me how your people were denied the right to expand, how you were trapped within borders that could not support your population, how you were left with no choice but to fight or die. Chen Wei paused, letting her words sink in. Humanity did not know these things. If we had known, we would have acted differently. And so, on behalf of my species, I apologize for the role we played in your suffering. The chamber had gone completely silent. Even the breathing of hundreds of Vorthen seemed to stop. In all the years of war, no one had ever apologized to them. No one had ever admitted that they might have been wronged. Now, Chen Wei continued, let me tell you what humanity offers, not demands, not punishments, offers. She activated a holographic display that showed a map of the galaxy. Stars and systems floated in the air around her, familiar patterns of space made beautiful by the advanced Vorthen technology. First, we offer immediate recognition of Vorthen territorial claims in the neutral zones. The worlds you have settled during this war will be yours, legally and permanently. No reparations, no conditions. More murmurs, these ones carrying a note of disbelief. The Council's previous offers had demanded that the Vorthen give up every world they had taken. This was the opposite. Second, we offer to sponsor Vorthen membership in the Galactic Council, with full voting rights and equal standing. Your voice will be heard alongside all other species. The murmurs grew louder. Some of the younger Vorthen in the audience were leaning forward, their scales shifting with obvious interest. Third, and most importantly, we offer an alliance. Not subjugation, not supervision, a true partnership between our species. Human technology and resources shared freely with Vorthen scientists and engineers. Joint exploration of new territories. Cultural exchange programs so our children can grow up knowing each other as friends, not enemies. Chen Wei lowered the display and looked directly at the 7 Supreme Elders. I know these terms are different from anything you have heard before. I know they may seem too good to believe, but I give you my word as a human and as a diplomat that they are genuine. Humanity wants peace, real peace, and we believe the only way to achieve it is to treat you with the respect you deserve. A long silence followed. Chen Wei stood motionless, waiting. Everything depended on the next few moments. Her career, the war, the lives of billions all hung in the balance. Finally, the central elder rose to his feet. His scales were shifting through colors she had never seen before, patterns of emotion she couldn't begin to interpret. "In 47 years," he said slowly, "no one has ever apologized to us. No one has ever acknowledged that we might have had reasons for what we did. No one has ever offered us anything except defeat and humiliation." He stepped down from his seat and walked toward her. "Your terms are not what we expected, human. They are better. They are what we wanted from the very beginning, before the war, before all the death. All we ever wanted was to be treated as equals." He stopped directly in front of her. Up close, she could see the weariness in his ancient eyes, the weight of decades of war pressing down upon him. "My name is Supreme Elder Vorath. I have led our people through the darkest years of our history. I have signed orders that sent millions to their deaths. I have watched worlds burn and families shatter. And I tell you now, Ambassador Chen Wei of Earth, that your offer of peace is accepted." The chamber erupted. Vorthan voices filled the air, some shouting in surprise, others in joy, a few in confusion. But beneath the noise, Chen Wei heard something she had never expected to hear. She heard hope. The news spread across the galaxy within hours. The Vorthan had accepted peace terms. The war was over, but the reaction was not what Chen Wei had hoped for. The Galactic Council was furious. Emergency sessions were called. Ambassadors from a dozen species demanded explanations, accused humanity of betrayal, threatened consequences. How could Earth make peace without consulting them? How could they offer such generous terms to an enemy that had killed billions? It was an insult to all who had died. It was a violation of everything the Council stood for. Chen Wei followed the news from Verath Ka, where she remained to finalize the treaty details. Every day brought new messages from angry allies. The Kelari recalled their ambassador from Earth. The Nexu threatened trade sanctions. Even species who had stayed neutral during the war joined in condemning humanity's actions. Some humans agreed with the criticism. Protests erupted on Earth and the colonies. People who had lost family members in the war demanded to know why the Vorthan weren't being punished. Politicians called for Chen Wei to be recalled and the treaty rejected. For a few tense weeks, it seemed like humanity itself might be torn apart by the decision she had made. Admiral Zhao handled most of the diplomatic fallout while Chen Wei focused on the work ahead. The treaty had to be perfect. Every word had to be clear, every promise enforceable. There could be no loopholes, no ambiguities, nothing that could be twisted into an excuse for more fighting. She spent weeks working alongside Elder Kesara and a team of Vorthan diplomats. They argued over borders, debated trade agreements, struggled to translate concepts that had no equivalent in each other's languages. It was exhausting, frustrating work, but it was also the most important thing she had ever done. The Vorthan negotiators surprised her. They were not the cold, ruthless warriors she had expected. They were thoughtful, passionate, and deeply committed to their families and their future. Many of them had lost loved ones in the war. They wanted peace just as badly as she did. One evening, as they took a break from yet another difficult session, Elder Kesara asked her a question that had clearly been on her mind for some time. "Tell me, Ambassador, why did humanity do this? Your council allies are turning against you. Your own species is divided over the treaty. You have paid a great cost for peace. Why?" Chen Wei considered the question carefully before answering. "Humans are young," she said. "In galactic terms, we have barely begun our journey among the stars. We don't have the Kelari's ancient wisdom or the Synthari's perfect logic. We make mistakes. We act on emotion. Sometimes that gets us into trouble." She smiled slightly. "But sometimes our emotions show us things that logic and wisdom miss. Such as the simple truth that you cannot build lasting peace on a foundation of punishment and humiliation. The Council's terms would have ended the fighting, yes, but they would have created generations of Vorthan who hated everything the galaxy stood for. One day, that hate would have exploded into a new war, worse than the first. Chen Wei met the Elder's eyes. We didn't make this peace for today. We made it for our grandchildren and yours. Elder Kesara was quiet for a moment. Then her scales shifted to that deep blue that Chen Wei had come to recognize as profound respect. Your species sees far, Ambassador, further than we expected, perhaps further than we deserve. Everyone deserves a chance at a better future, Chen Wei replied. That's what we believe, that's why we're here. The treaty signing ceremony took place 3 months later, on a neutral station built specifically for the occasion. It was the largest diplomatic gathering in galactic history. Representatives from every known species came to witness the moment that would end the longest and bloodiest war the galaxy had ever seen. The station had been constructed in record time, a joint effort between human and Vorthan engineers. It was beautiful, a symbol of what the two species could accomplish when they worked together instead of fighting. Chen Wei stood on one side of the ceremonial table, Supreme Elder Vorath on the other. Behind them, their respective delegations waited in formal silence. Around the chamber, thousands of observers watched from tiered seats, their attention fixed on the two figures at the center of everything. Chen Wei's daughter was there, wearing her military uniform. She had received special permission to attend. When Chen Wei looked at her, she saw the same mix of hope and uncertainty that she felt herself. Before we begin, Supreme Elder Vorath said, his voice amplified to reach every corner of the room, I wish to speak. The observers stirred with surprise. This wasn't part of the planned ceremony, but Vorath seemed unconcerned with protocol. 47 years ago, my predecessor stood in a room much like this one and pleaded with the Galactic Council for permission to settle uninhabited worlds. He explained that our people were dying. He begged for mercy. The Council refused. They called us dangerous, aggressive, a threat to galactic peace. Vorath paused, letting the weight of history fill the silence. In a way, they were right. We became everything they feared. We became conquerors and killers and monsters. Because that was the only role the galaxy would let us play. He turned to face Chen Wei directly. And then humanity came to us, not with demands or threats, but with something we had never received from any other species: understanding, respect, an open hand instead of a closed fist. His scales rippled with emotion. You gave us something to be besides monsters. You gave us the chance to be partners, equals, and friends. This is a debt we can never fully repay. He picked up the ceremonial stylus and signed the treaty, his ancient writing flowing across the document in the traditional Vorthan script. Chen Wei took the stylus next. Her hand trembled slightly as she added her own signature beside his. This treaty is not just a piece of paper, she said, speaking to the assembled observers. It is a promise that we will learn from our mistakes, a promise that we will treat each other with dignity and respect, a promise that our children will know a galaxy without the shadow of this war hanging over them. She set down the stylus. Humanity is proud to make this promise, and we will keep it, no matter what challenges lie ahead. The chamber erupted in applause. Some of it was genuine celebration. Some of it, Chen Wei knew, was simply relief that the war was finally over. And some of it, particularly from the council representatives, was probably begrudging acceptance of a situation they could no longer change. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the document sitting on the table between her and Supreme Elder Vorath. What mattered was that the killing had stopped. What mattered was that peace, real peace, finally had a chance. The months that followed were difficult. The Galactic Council did not forgive humanity quickly for acting without their approval. Trade restrictions were imposed. Diplomatic relations cooled. Some human colonies near Council space found themselves isolated and unsupported. But the alliance with the Vorthan grew stronger every day. Scientists from both species began working together on projects that would have been impossible alone. They discovered new energy sources, developed better medical treatments, and explored regions of space that neither species could have reached by themselves. Cultural exchanges brought young humans to Vorthan worlds and young Vorthan to human colonies. For the first time in nearly 50 years, ships from both civilizations flew side by side without weapons locked on each other. Children who had grown up hearing stories of monsters learned that those monsters were actually people, with hopes and fears and dreams just like their own. Chen Wei's daughter became one of the first military officers assigned to a joint human-Vorthan patrol. She sent messages home talking about her Vorthan crewmates, their strange sense of humor, their fierce loyalty to each other, their surprising kindness. In one message, she wrote, "I used to hate them, Mom. I really did. But now I can't imagine going back to how things were before." Chen Wei returned to Earth a hero to some and a traitor to others. She testified before Congress, explaining her actions and defending the treaty. She wrote reports, gave speeches, and spent countless hours answering the same questions over and over. Why had she acted alone? Why had she trusted the Vorthan? How could she justify such generous terms? Her answer was always the same, because it was the right thing to do. 2 years after the treaty signing, Chen Wei received an invitation that surprised even her. The Galactic Council, the same council that had condemned her actions, requested her presence at an emergency session. They didn't explain why. She arrived at the council headquarters expecting hostility. What she found was something very different. The chamber was full when she entered, representatives from every species watching as she walked to the speaker's platform. At the head of the room, the council chairman, an ancient Kalari named Salath, rose to address her. "Ambassador Chen Wei," he said, "2 years ago you defied this council. You negotiated peace with our enemy without our knowledge or consent. You gave them terms we considered unacceptable. You acted alone and you succeeded." Chen Wei said nothing. She simply waited. "In the time since, we have observed the results of your actions. The Vorthan have kept their promises. They have not expanded beyond the agreed boundaries. They have not attacked our shipping or threatened our colonies. They have become, against all our expectations, reliable partners in galactic affairs." Salath paused. "More importantly, we have learned the truth about why the war began. We have seen the records your Vorthan allies shared with you. And we understand now that our own decisions, decades ago, helped create the tragedy that followed." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. This was not the kind of admission the council was known for making. "We called this session to acknowledge our mistakes," Salath continued, "and to acknowledge the wisdom of your approach. You saw what we were too proud to see. You listened when we refused to hear. You treated our enemies as fellow beings deserving of respect, and in doing so, you ended a war that all our diplomatic wisdom could not." He gestured to a seat that had been prepared for her among the council representatives. "Ambassador Chen Wei, by unanimous vote of this council, you have been appointed as special envoy for interspecies relations. Your methods will become our methods. Your approach will become our standard. Humanity's way of peacemaking will guide us all." Chen Wei felt tears threatening to fall. She had never expected this. She had never sought recognition or honor. She had only wanted to stop the dying. "I accept this honor," she said finally, "but not for myself. I accept it on behalf of everyone who believed that peace was possible when the galaxy had given up hope. I accept it for the billions who died in a war that never should have happened. And I accept it as a commitment to ensure that we never make the same mistakes again." She took her seat among the council representatives. Around her, delegates from 100 species nodded their approval. Even the Kalari and the Nexu, who had opposed her most fiercely, seemed to accept her presence. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had changed it, not through force or conquest or superior technology, but through something much simpler. Through the willingness to listen, to understand, and to treat their enemies as equals. That was the human way. And finally, the rest of the galaxy was beginning to understand its power. 50 years later, Chen Wei passed away peacefully at her home on Earth. She was 103 years old. She had spent her final decades training the next generation of diplomats, teaching them the lessons she had learned among the Vorthen. Her funeral was the largest in human history. Representatives from every species in the galaxy came to pay their respects. Supreme Elder Vorath, now incredibly ancient but still alive, made the journey from his homeworld to stand beside her grave. "She gave my people our future," he said in his eulogy. "She saw us not as monsters but as parents who loved their children enough to fight for them. She understood that true peace requires not just an end to fighting, but a healing of the wounds that caused it." His voice trembled with age and emotion. "The galaxy is better because she lived, and we must never forget the lessons she taught us." The war that had killed 17 billion was now a distant memory. Human and Vorthen children grew up together, their friendship so natural that they could barely comprehend a time when their species had been enemies. Schools taught the history of the conflict not as a story of good versus evil, but as a cautionary tale about what happens when people refuse to listen to each other. The galaxy was not perfect, of course. There were still conflicts, still disagreements, still the endless complications of different species trying to share the stars. But there was also peace. Real, lasting peace. And when disputes arose, the parties involved often remembered Chen Wei's example. They remembered that sometimes the best way to defeat an enemy is to turn them into a friend. Chen Wei's great-granddaughter became a diplomat herself, continuing the family tradition. She worked on the frontier of known space, helping to establish first contact protocols with newly discovered species. In her office, she kept a picture of her great-grandmother standing beside Supreme Elder Vorath on the day the treaty was signed. "She taught us the most important lesson any species can learn," the young diplomat would tell her students. "Our enemies are not monsters. They are people with reasons for what they do. And if we can understand those reasons, if we can address their true needs instead of just demanding surrender, then we can end any war." And it all started because one human woman dared to ask a simple question: what does the enemy actually want? The answer had been the same thing everyone wants: a home for their children, a voice in their own destiny, respect from those around them. These were not complicated desires. They were not the demands of monsters. They were the hopes of any parent, any citizen, any person anywhere in the universe. Humanity understood this because humanity was young and still remembered what it felt like to be small and powerless and afraid. They had not yet learned to see other species as inherently different, inherently alien, inherently less deserving of basic dignity. And so, when all the ancient and wise civilizations of the galaxy failed to make peace, the young and foolish humans succeeded. Not through strength, not through cleverness, but through the simple, powerful act of seeing their enemies as fellow beings worthy of understanding. This was humanity's gift to the galaxy, and it would echo through the stars for generations to come. In the great histories that were written about the Vorthen War, one line appeared again and again. The war ended not because humanity was stronger than the Vorthen, but because humanity was wise enough to give them the peace they actually wanted. It was, perhaps, the most human thing of all.